presented, Mr. Chairman.
I move that we approve the agenda for the November 28th, 2018 as presented.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for today as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passed. Number 3, approval of minutes.
Move that we approve the minutes of October 24th, 2018 as presented.
It's been moved and presented, or moved and seconded to approve the minutes for October 24th, 2018 as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion is carried. Correspondence.
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Public comment. Not seeing any. Reports. So, 6.1, National FFA Convention Report.
Mr. Stratton, would you like to introduce your crew here?
Yes, Mr. Cahill and board. I have with me Ms. Reese, our FFA advisor, and 3 of her senior students who went to the national convention, and they are getting ready to put on I'm sure, a quality display of information, the good times they had. I was wondering if they're going to do the full sale that they did at their, what do we call it, the ag dinner?
Nope, we revised that.
Fall FFA.
Fall FFA banquet.
We were told we
out,
couldn't do that.
if you missed out on it, it was a great presentation, but I'm sure that they'll share some great stuff. And I'm hoping some year that maybe I'm a chaperone get to attend because it sounds like they had too much fun.
Welcome, FFA.
All right, hi everyone. On October 21st, 8 of us began our journey with a wonderful 4-hour bus ride to Reno, full of lots of adventures and conversation about the trip to come. When we got there, we decided we wanted to go to a movie because there are no movie theaters in Lakeview. And so we all split off to go see which movie we wanted. Some of us, the scariest movie of our lives, others a tearjerker, and for Christy, with her Marvel movie. We had to make a pit stop on the way though. Let's just say Libby's suitcase could fit a body, so we needed to swap it out at Walmart. Then we went to our high-class, budget-allowing hotel. You know, the one where you don't want to take your shoes off? And the next morning, we were ready to head south.
That morning we arrived at the airport ready for smooth sailing and short lines. We landed in Las Vegas where we had a 2-hour layover before we headed to Nashville. Our next flight, we all slept for about 3 hours in preparation for the busy days to come. Finally, we were in Music City.
Tired from flying all day, we were ready for some good food. Cindy met up with her long-lost niece, who showed us a great burger place to eat. The 3 of us, who were all in Christy's band, decided that before bed, we wanted to check out the lights of Nashville. In awe of Music Row, we sprung the rest of the caravan from their rooms so they could enjoy the experience for the second time around. The next day, we went to the Country Music Hall of Fame, the Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline Museum. Next, explored Music Row and all it had to offer, with Kara and Abby swing dancing everywhere and any chance they got. Finally, we made our way to Opryland, where we explored the hotel and the unique boat ride in the river around the hotel where Dolly Parton once stayed. We all thought it was very fascinating. It was Opry time. We made our way to the Opry House. Finally, the show started. We watched 8 amazing performers. It consisted of Dustin Lynch, Rascal Flatts, Tracy Lawrence, and more. It's definitely something to mark off the bucket list. That night, we continued our adventure and drove an hour to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and camped out there for the night.
Next morning, we woke up bright and early, and we woke up bright and early and headed to the convention. While standing in awe of 65,000 fellow FFA members from all 50 states, we followed along to the opening session, where we listened to the national officers talk about the theme, Just One, while explaining its meaning, and then listened to a keynote speaker who looked kind of like Jesus, give us an understanding of the everyday adversity that teenagers like us face. It was a great first session, so we decided to have an early dinner at Hooters. While there, Libby was kind enough to go and organize a surprise birthday party for me, even though my birthday was 2 weeks away. Let's just say I tore up the dance floor. It was great. From there, we made our way to the Lucas Oil Stadium, where we watched Ned,
Ledoux.
and Garth Brooks put on an amazing performance.
The next day we woke up early and walked for hours through the expo that consisted of shopping, which taught us that without our parents there, we really had to budget our money. In the expo there were college vendors, ag companies, an awesome welding simulator, and a Wild Horse virtual reality goggle station. The expo really opened our eyes to different colleges that are out there and all the different career paths in agriculture.
After the expo, we were on our way to a Segway tour when there was a little bump in the road and a miscommunication. But hey, it turned out to be better because we fulfilled Alex's dream by racing go-karts. Christy showed us all up by getting first place. She was out for blood. Half of us caught on to the speed of the fast track while the other half couldn't quit spinning out into the walls. We finished up that night at a standard bred horse track, watching races and eating a fancy dinner. Brett was in heaven. That next morning we got up, put on our OD for the last time, and went and explored the expo again. I can speak for everyone and tell you that we were all pretty exhausted. We definitely got our steps in for this trip. Later that morning we drove to the airport, boarded the plane, and in minutes we were all out. We were so excited to see the big yellow bus drive up to the airport. We got some grub and hightailed it for home. Due to the sleep deprivation, our actions were abnormal, to say the least. For instance, Kara had a tough time holding on to her food. Finally, we made it home at about 10 o'clock with everyone who started the trip. Thank goodness. This trip was one of a kind with great music, yummy food, lots of caffeine, and a very impressive FFA convention. We are so grateful of the support from our parents and community. This trip wouldn't have been possible without you guys. Thank you.
Sounds like a fabulous trip. Yep, nice report. Thanks for coming in tonight. Thank you. Any questions?
So it was a bummer you guys missed the president, huh?
Yeah,
We came home a day
we were
late.
1 day late.
I know, we didn't know, so we would have had to stay another day.
The last meeting I bragged that you're going to see the president. Didn't quite come to fruition, so.
There were 65,000 members there, and they were only giving out 7,000 tickets. There were people that stood in line for 3.5 hours and didn't get tickets to see the president. So
You could have prevailed.
I tried. I tried hard.
we were trying to get home too for the soccer kids, because we had some soccer kids on our trip with us. We took 8 students and 2 chaperones and myself.
Is that pretty typical of all the schools or that participated, about 8, 10, or did some take a
No.
whole
There were
bunch
some
of
that had a
kids, or-
lot.
It just kind of depends on the chapter.
Yeah, it does. It just depends. Some people, we go every other year. I know a lot of like Bonanza and Lost River, Henley, they go every other year as well. And they take like 8 to 15. I would imagine some of the larger schools take more, but I think, to be truthful, I think this is a perfect number.
We're talking thousands of schools are participating.
Oh, definitely. You bet.
You said the count was 65,000 this year.
65,000 FFA members, yeah.
It's definitely changed. I went as a senior back in 1974, and in Kansas City it was 7,000.
Yeah.
And
And
they would have got to see the president.
Yeah, I got to see Gerald Ford. So,
Okay, so moving on, thank you so much for that report. 6.2 ASB report.
Mr. Stratton, you want to introduce that, or Ms. Wise?
Kinda, yeah. You go ahead. Go ahead.
So this is Maya, she is our,
That's Libby's, right?
our ASB president, and she has our ASB report for this month. I'm gonna keep this over here.
Thank you.
Okay, so the LHS Student Council took their annual trip to Seaside for fall conference the first weekend of November. The weather was great. We stayed in a cool house by the canal and we learned a lot too. Our council members were able to meet and engage with other schools and keynote speakers to draw from their projects new ideas for our school. We had so much fun and came back with lots of ideas to try. On November 16th, we had the fall recognition assembly for the entire school. We had a slideshow for the fall activities and recognized student excellence in academics and attendance. Now our student council is working on the winter project list. Some of those projects include the annual door decorating, locker signs for winter sports, and the ugly sweater contest. We expect to have a winter pep assembly later in December as well. And that is all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you so much. Okay, 6.3, Title 3, House Bill 3499.
Turn that right over to Mrs. Warren.
I'll try and make this as brief as possible. I gave each one of you a report that Susan Albertson typed up for you so that you can make references later, and then if you have questions, you can email her or myself. There's two different programs that we're going to talk about tonight. We're required to report to our school boards for Title III and House Bill 3499 annually, and we haven't been very on the ball. The first one we want to talk about is Title III, federally funded program, similar to Title I, but serves specifically EL kiddos. And all it means is that their first language is not English. They're in three categories. We have 31 current EL students that are receiving services 5 days a week, 23 at the elementary and 8 at the middle high school. And I would credit Susan Albertson to the amount of kids that are coming into 7th grade. It decreases greatly as those grade levels go up, which it should, right? Because we say that our EL students should be proficient in about 4 to 5 years, depending on what they come in with for language. And then we have 27 kids that were required by the federal government to monitor for X amount of years, usually about 2. And then we have 16 former EL students, and you guys can look at those numbers. So quite a few kiddos that the EL staff is serving. And sometimes they get quite a bit of support, and we want that so that we can graduate as many kids as we can in the EL department. Last year you graduated 100%, I believe, of your EL students. So the program's working and it's doing a good job. We don't take a lot of money as far as Title III funding as a stipend. It's only about $5,000, but we do get funding for EL students in our ADM. The second one we want to talk about is a little more lucrative for our district. House Bill 3499 has been on the books for about 2 years. Shannon, 3 years? Something like that. We're in our
I think
second
this
year.
is
3?
4.
Year 4.
Going into 4.
Yeah.
And the state legislature, this is state funded, and the state legislature wanted to improve across the board the EL numbers for graduation rates and also those kids reaching proficiency as quickly as possible. And so our district is awarded about $90,000 a year. We've talked about House Bill 3499 a little bit. And one of the things that's happening that is just tremendous for our district because of where we live is that we've been able to bring in math and language arts consultants to work with our entire staff to do professional development because it's so difficult for us to get staff out because of our travel costs for professional development. This is reaching all of our staff, which is great. Some of the other things that money is being used for is stipends for homework support, parent activities nights. We've sent 2 of our staff members to training as interpreters so that they're a little more proficient in how to interpret and what language to use. We also are using it for substitutes. Part of that professional development is paying for substitutes so our teachers can rotate through and meet with those consultants on a real individual basis by grade level or by department level at Mr. Stratton's school. And then we do have some salary built in there. We can't use much of it for salary for a half-time bilingual assistant. We also struggle a little bit with our EL kids when we have newcomers coming into the community, especially if it's not Spanish. Our bilingual staff speak Spanish, but last year we had a gentleman that came to us as a student that spoke Mandarin Chinese, and we were really struggling with how to serve that student. And so these funds pay for some time to put together a newcomer's handbook, but for some software for those newcomers as well, and then some additional curriculum to support curriculum. Can I answer any questions for you guys?
No, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, looks like we are to 6.4, state report card.
Eric Counts, our test coordinator. We report on test results from 17-18.
Hey guys, so I put together, as usual, a PowerPoint. It's going to go over our test scores for 17-18. You may have noticed the report cards look a little different this year. The state redesigned those, so there's two documents you have now, the at-a-glance report and then the accountability details report. I pull all my stuff off the accountability details report just because it's easier for me. I'm using the all student group, so we're looking at all the students in each school. But if you want to find subgroup information, that's where you find it. It's on that accountability details report. They break that down by all of the different groups if that's something that you're interested in looking at. I started with English Language Arts this year. I've also pulled some data that didn't come into the report cards that came from the Oregon Department of Education website, so that we could look at these test results by grade level and also some trend data, because we talked about that last year, that you might want to look at some of that. So this is a summary of the Union School report card for English Language Arts. So this is all grade levels, so the grades that are tested at Union are 3rd through 6th. We have the past 3 years worth of data and then a 3-year average. So you can see as a school, Union's had a significant increase in proficiency over the last 3 years. They give you a rating. There's 5 levels. The top level is a level 5, which is 80% proficiency. That's the state goal right now for math and ELA. They'd like to eventually see everyone get to 80%. We got a level 4 rating, which means we were between 67 and 79% proficient. So we're just under the 80% goal, which is excellent. The state average was 52%, so you can see with our last year's scores, we're well above that. This is a look at those scores by grade level. As you can see, the younger grades are doing incredibly well. The 4th grade has met that 80% goal, and the 3rd grade, you can't get any better than that. 100% of those kids pass that test. The older grades are roughly 20% below the 80% goal, and that's where they're sitting right now. So we can look at some trend data by cohort, which just means we're following the same group of kids over the years. Unfortunately, I don't have anything for 3rd grade or 11th grade when it's applicable, because we don't have consecutive years of data there. But 4th grade, last year at Union, those guys had a 13.3% increase in proficiency from their 3rd grade to their 4th grade year. 5th grade, they had a 17% drop between their 3rd and 4th grade year, but then they made some of that back up with a 10% increase this last year. The 6th graders, sometimes we struggle with a lack of data at Union. ODE won't report anything if the class size is too small. So for this 6th grade class, they had some really small classes early on. But you can see from the 2 years, we do have data for each class. In the 5th grade, they were 28.6% proficient, so they had a 20.5% increase this last year. So a trend here for the cohorts, all the Union cohorts are showing an increase in proficiency over the last 2 years. You can also look at trend data by grade level. So just remember, we're not looking at the same groups of kids here. We can look at 3rd and 11th grade in this case. So this is Union's 3rd grade. Their performance was pretty consistent. In 15, 16, and 16, 17, they scored the exact same. We didn't have data in 14, 15, but as you can see, there was a big spike this year, and 100% of those kids passed the test. 4th grade had a rough first year. That was expected. A lot of our grade levels did. Lack of data for the 2nd year in the 2nd group, but a huge amount of growth at this grade level in the last 2 years. 5th grade, again, a lack of data at the beginning there and a rough 2nd year, but they have also been performing better every year. So again, all grade levels at Union, trend of increased performance over the last 4 years for English. Skip these guys. All right. So that brings us to Fremont. So they're doing the same grade levels as Union, 3rd through 6th. So this is their past 3 years and their 3-year average. So as a school, they had a slight drop in proficiency during the first 2 years, but a slight increase in the last year. They rated us on the 3-year average, and the only reason they do that is they just give you the benefit of the doubt. They'll rate you on your 17, 18 scores or your 3-year average, whichever was higher. So that gave us a level 3, which means we were between 54% and 66% proficient. We're above the state average at 52% with our 3-year average, and still very, very close to that with our 17, 18 scores.
So this isn't forward, so this is all grades, right?
Yeah, 3rd through 6th. Yeah, they
3rd
just
through
kind
6th.
of,
So over 3 years, you your third graders in 15, 16 are now fifth graders in 17, 18.
This is a breakdown for our 17-18 results by grade level. So one thing I noticed that all of these grades are within 5% of each other, so their scores are very comparable. The highest scoring grade was 26.2% below the level 5 goal of 80%. That was the third graders. Trend data by cohort, you look at the fourth grade, they had the exact same percentage of proficiency for 2 years. They actually do consider that a minute amount of growth because they have more challenging rigorous standards as they get older. So that's where they were at. Fifth grade, they've had a slight drop in proficiency over the last 3 years, but it is very, very small. In sixth grade, they had an 8.9% drop between fourth and fifth grade, but they managed to increase slightly by 2.6% this year. So all of the cohorts are within 3% of their last year's scores, so it seems that they're maintaining their proficiency levels as well. You look at it as a grade level. Third grade, not a lot of change, even though these are different groups of kids. They seem to live in the lower 50th percentile range. Fourth grade, a slight decrease in the middle 2 years, but again, living in the low 50th percentile for the last 2 years. Fifth grade had a big spike in 15-16. That was a high performing group. In the last 2 years, they've been in the high 40s. And sixth grade had their biggest decrease between their first and second year of testing, but the last 3 years they've been in the low 50s as well. So all the grade levels here, a trend of consistent performance in the 50th percentile range. And that will bring us to the middle school. Daily middle school, so we're looking at just 7th and 8th grade here lumped together. As a school, a 12.1% decrease during 15-16 and 16-17, and a 7.7% increase this last year. We got rated our 17-18 results. We got a level 2, which means we were between 33 and 53% proficient. I want to point out we just barely missed the level 3 rating. We had to get 54%, so we were really, really close to that. We're still pretty close to the state average. It's 57%. We're a tiny bit below it, but not far from it. This is what those scores look like by grade level. 7th grade did really well. They're only 10% away from that level 5 goal at 80%. The 8th grade is about halfway there at 40%. Even though that's not a very high number, you will see when we look at their cohort data that they did show growth as a grade level.
So it's,
Sorry, go
oh, never mind. I think it's right here in the cohort data, but if you go back to that 7th grade group, you were just at the 5th grade, I believe, and there was a spike.
Was that them?
And that was
These guys, 15,
16 would have been
Yep.
7th graders.
So when did we switch for Oaks to Smarter Balance? What year were we on Smarter Balance?
14, 15.
14, 15.
So this is our 7th graders by cohort. They had, a fairly significant drop in their 6th grade year, but they had their highest amount of growth this last year, and that put them really close to the 80% goal. And I know a lot of times people like to look at the transition here from elementary to middle school, and it would seem for ELA these guys had a pretty positive experience. 8th grade, they had their biggest hit in the 7th grade, so that's also the transition there for them, so it was a little bit different. They did make a 4.3% increase in proficiency this last year, so that is the good news that they're slowly working their way back up, and hopefully we'll continue to see that. So trends, both of these groups had their lowest performance in 16-17, which is interesting, so I don't know if it had something to do with the test that year, but they've both also had an increase in proficiency in the last 2 years. So now we can look at the grade level. 14-15 was the first year we started giving that test, so we can look at it over the last 4 years. It's kind of all over the place. I do know for 7th grade ELA we've had 3 different teachers in the last 3 years. I found it hard to find a definite trend here when you see the 70.8% compared to here, but that's what that looks like. And then the 8th grade, Other than last year's group, they performed pretty similarly over the previous 3 years, all within 10%. And that brings us to the high school. We don't look at grade level results here because it's just the 11th grade that takes this test, so it already is that. One thing I noticed, they don't put the state average on the high school report card anymore. So that's why I don't have it on here. It's not that I forgot, they just don't include it. As a school, there was a 13.2% decrease during 15-16 and 16-17. But we've maintained performance at around 65% for the last 2 years. We have a level 5 rating on our 3-year average, so we're between 67 and 79% proficient. But if our performance maintains at 65%, we're probably going to fall to a level 3 next year, because that 77.8 is knocking our 3-year average up. So we don't have trend data by cohort, but we can look at the grade level. We had a steady decrease in performance for these 11th grade groups since the first year, but last year was the first year that we stopped that trend with a slight amount of growth with that different group. And I'm going to go into math, so if anyone wants to ask me questions about English before we go on, or we can just keep going.
Test hasn't changed? Test
No.
hasn't changed?
Well, it did change. The biggest change they had last year was they took out, used to have in the English portion, you'd have to write short answer questions on that first test. Well, they took that out so that the test would go faster because it was just taking too long. So you still do writing, you just do an essay as the second part, but for the most part, it's the same deal.
Have they changed cut scores?
No.
So it's been the same cut score?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody had to score like a 210?
Yeah, it's like in the 2000s, but yeah, everybody has to stay,
so
It will eventually change because, and we talked about this last year, all the students who were in 8th grade when they started Smarter Balanced, they cannot hold them to a higher achievement level than what the Oaks test was. That's just their rule. So they have cut scores for the seniors, and it may be, when you look at a Smarter Balanced report, a level 4 or a level 3 is college and career ready, and a level 4 is like exceeding that. So that's really where you want your kid to be, because that means they're on track for college. But since the Oaks test was less rigorous and not aligned to the Common Core standards, the passing score for seniors right now may fall on like a level 2. So that'll eventually change once they get to whatever cohort that is, and there hasn't been a lot of communication on that, but the cut scores will probably change at that point in time. Yeah. So going to math, back to Union. Remember all grade levels here. These guys, again, steady increase in proficiency over the last 3 years. They had their lowest amount in 15-16. That was only the second year, so that was expected. But they scored a level 4 this last year with 77.8% proficient. They were just below that level 5 and well above the state average at 43%. By grade level here, again, you can see those younger grades just knocked it out of the park. All of the kids were proficient. 5th grade as well, they met the goal at 80%. 6th grade still about 50% short of the level 5 goal, but they didn't have a decrease in proficiency from the previous year, and we'll see that in just a second.
I have a question. Remind me, when did we implement a full day kindergarten?
I believe it was my first year as superintendent, it would have been 15-16.
And did Union not have it prior to?
They had it prior to town.
They did. So at Union, your 4th graders had it, and then the 3rd graders did it for the entire school.
I think you're close. I'd have to look, Dustin, because we had kindergarten out at Union for at least 2 or 3 years before town did.
Yeah.
I think it was last year's 5th grade.
I think Aiden's year, which would be a 4th grader, was the last year that there was a half-day kindergarten. So the 4th
In
grade
town.
class, yeah.
But Union had the full day at that point in time.
Yeah.
And
And they'd had it for a number of years before that, but I think it was only a few, 3 maybe.
And is there the students at Union consistently, if they're there in kindergarten, are they consistently there through 6th grade?
We're more consistent as far as turnover with kiddos out at Union, but we've had an influx because half the kids at Union are from town. And so it's no different with that half of the population than it is with the Fremont Hay kids as far as that. But the kids that live out there are pretty consistent staying out there.
If you go by cohort, Union's fourth graders last year, they met the goal last year at 83.3%, and then they exceeded the goal this year at 100%, which is awesome. Fifth grade, they had a 33.7% decrease in the fourth grade, but then they followed up with a huge increase this last year to go all the way up to 80% and meet the goal. Sixth grade, we have a lack of data for those first two testing years, but there is a minute amount of growth between the last 2 years where they just maintained proficiency. So I see two trends here, and if you guys want to chime in, I know I don't see everything. There's a substantial increase in proficiency in the fourth and fifth grade this last year, and they're maintaining proficiency levels in the sixth grade.
One thing that I see, I guess in math, we are now, when did we change the curriculum in math? That was 2 years ago? Last year.
At the elementary level?
Yeah.
The elementary level.
It was my last year at Fremont Hay, would have been 14, 15.
So we've been in it 5 years.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we just changed something with Common Core. When it was Common Core and
Common Core was 2011.
Okay. It seemed like we went from a different math. Engage New York, I think, or something.
And this is our 5th year into that.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm. We've been having that much fun for that long.
I was just wondering if there's anything there, because it seems like what the kids, seemed like with my older kids, that was a challenge because, you know, Gage, New York, the younger kids are exposed to a lot of things that the older kids didn't get until later on in their math careers. And I was wondering if that exposure over the years helped them transition.
Certainly, because if we, yeah, it doesn't, because if we've been in there for 5 years and we've got drops in math scores that 7th, 8th grade year, the Smarter Balance is still testing those Common Core things, but they don't have the exposure, like you said, and that background that a lot of our younger kids now have all the way through. And they're playing catch up all the time.
Yeah, it just seemed like now there's a little bit of a new concept comes in frequently through it versus you don't get any of it and then all of a sudden, bam, here it is.
Right.
Trend out by grade level for Union in math. Third grade, steady increase in proficiency over 3 years for this grade level, all the way to 100%. Fourth grade, that first group had a rough year. We have a lack of data for the second year, but there's been a huge increase for this grade level in the last 2 years as well. Fifth grade, steady increase between 15-16 and 16-17, both of those groups, and then a significant jump to the 80% goal this last year. Sixth grade, again, we don't have a lot to look at because we're consistently missing data in those first couple of years, but there was a 23.6% increase between the last two reported groups of students. So even though that 28.6% number isn't very high, it's a lot higher than 5%, so there was some good growth there. So all the grade levels show a trend of increased performance over the last few years. Some are larger than others, but also for all grade levels, there was a spike this last year. So there were some really good things happening. Brings us to Fremont Hay for math. They had a slight increase between 15-16 and 16-17, 3.2%, and then a slight decrease between the last 2 years, 5.6%. But overall, the proficiency levels have maintained as a school over the last 3 years. They rated on the 3-year average because it was a little bit higher. Got a level 3 rating, which means they were between 43 and 61% proficient. And they were above the Oregon average of 43% for last year's scores and their 3-year average. There's the scores broken down by grade level. 4th, 5th, and 6th are performing very similarly. They're all within 2% of one another. The 3rd grade did slightly better. They were 7.5% higher than the 4th grade, but all of these guys are roughly halfway to the 80% goal. And when you go back, the 43% average, they're all 3 of them are above that, and the 5th is still really close as well. By cohort, the 4th grade, They had a decrease between their first and second testing year at 11.2%. Fifth grade had a slight decrease between the first 2 years, it was less than 5%, and then a more notable decrease between the last 2 years at 13.4%. Sixth grade, slight decrease between year 1 and the following 2 years, and then a decrease of 8.5% in the last 2 years. So trend here, all the cohorts showed a decrease in proficiency, but very slight over multiple testing years. By grade level, you look at the third grade group, the 15-16 group did just slightly better than the others, but really still this grade seems to live in the 50th percentile, which is similar to how they performed in ELA. Fourth grade, that same group did slightly better, and last year's group has slightly lower scores, but again, the majority of these different groups of students are in the 50th percentile. Fifth grade, this grade level is mostly in the 40th percentile. However, their performance did improve in the first 3 years. Each group did a little bit better than the rest. And then sixth grade, they were below the 50th percentile for the last 3 years, up and down. Not a lot of regularity other than the scoring range. So trends I see are third and fourth on average are scoring in the 50th percentile range, and fifth and sixth on average are scoring in the 40th percentile range. Which brings us to middle school. 7th and 8th grade, we had a notable decrease, 25.1% between 15-16 and 16-17. We did make most of that back up last year with a 22% increase. We got a level 2 rating, which means we were between 21 and 42% proficient. We were just below the level 3 rating. And we were about 38% below the 80% goal, so about halfway there. And when you look at our 17-18 scores, you can see that we are very comparable to the state average at 42%. So when you break those down by grade level, you can see that 7th is the higher achieving class. They're about 30% below the 80% goal. And 8th is the lower achieving class at 32.7%. But they did actually show growth too from last year to this year. And we'll look at that. This is the 7th grade. Their scores are pretty similar over the years. They've had an 8.9% increase over the last 3 years. And then 8th grade had a steady decrease in their first 3 years. So we're seeing that go down, but last year they showed a 9.2% increase, which is actually pretty good. And they scored higher last year than they did the previous 2 years. So small levels of growth in both these cohorts, and 8th grade reversed their trend of decreased proficiency, which was a good thing. Grade level report, 7th grade level has been up and down. Their best performance was in 17-18 at 50%. 8th grade has been kind of up and down as well. Their best performance was in 15-16 at 44.6%. And they both had their worst performance in 16-17, which was the same as the ELA. So trend up and down and unable to exceed the 50th percentile. Brings us to the high school, 11th grade. There was a steady decrease in proficiency in math over the last 3 years. They rated us using our 3-year average. We got a level 2 rating. We were between 21 and 42% proficient, 52% below the 80% goal using the 3-year average, and 60.3% below that goal using the 17-18 results. Again, these are our 11th grade results, so we don't have to break those down, but we can look at the grade level over the last 4 years. As you can see, there was a slight increase in proficiency between year 1 and 2 of testing, but then a steady decrease in proficiency over the last 3 years, so the trend is decreased performance. And that is but I would happily go back to anything anyone wanted to see.
Is that state average based upon last year's scores, or is it the 2-year average as well?
pretty sure it's based on last year's scores.
Any thoughts from you administrators?
Questions? Why do you think 16, 17 was a low year?
I have no idea. There were, and Brandy's not here, so but I remember talking last year about some of the things that may have been going on for for our middle schoolers. There were just some things that happened that were traumatic.
16,
and
17.
Was that 16, yeah, it was.
That was unfortunately, Moni was a
Yeah.
very strong part of our math program. We lost Moni at the beginning of 16, 17.
Any questions? Comments? Well, thank you for that presentation.
Nice job.
I like it that we're finally getting enough years to do trades.
Yeah, it was actually fun
Yeah.
to pull that. I was glad you brought that up.
And obviously the longer we go with some consistency, the better the trends, a little more meaningful.
Yeah, it's a better picture for sure.
Well, thank you, appreciate it.
And I appreciate the PowerPoint. The large, yeah.
No, it's your little teamwork.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, if you're not a graph person. Thank you.
Okay, we are at 6.5 OSBA convention.
I decided to do a very detailed write-up for you. Hopefully you had a chance to go through that. I guess, how about if I just throw it open to you for questions if you went through that?
I did go through it, and nothing sticks out in my mind that I had a question about.
I think just the main theme of the convention is advocacy for this upcoming legislative session. Just two little bits here. OSBA is going to, have a budget of $1.5 million to advocate for a $10.7 billion budget to fit the quality education model. It's a very lofty goal. More power to them if they can do it. I think you saw the governor rolled out her budget today at $9 billion. So let the games begin, I guess, is about all I can say on that. We'll see where the legislature, where the governor, how OSBA fits in this, and all the other aspects and groups and how it should. The other theme of the convention was equity. We had a lot of presentations on equity, not just in regard to race or color or those types of socioeconomic identifications, but we're talking poverty, we're talking kids of all walks of life. I think the thing that really stuck out to me was the North Clackamas superintendent was the keynote speaker the second day. That was a pretty inspiring speech. He's done a lot for that school district. It's a huge school district. He said there's 70 different languages spoken in that school district. I mean, that's quite a challenge. That's beyond. I think challenge is just covering Spanish speaking in this district. I can imagine how it would be like in Woodburn or Clackamas to address those needs. But I've got you can learn a lot of things from the superintendent, which I intend to really inquire and find out more because he's really written raise your test scores. Their attendance rates are way up, and I'd like to see what the secret to his successes are. So. That's kind of it. Those were the two heavy themes. Great convention. I think we need to build some budget money back in, start taking your board members along, some of you. It'd be great for you to go see that. So anyway, it's as a professional, it's always good for me to go to that every year and meet my peers and talk to them and swap ideas, and it's just, to me, it's professionally enriching. So that's it.
Okay. And I briefly glanced over, I didn't have anything jumped out at me, so
Okay.
yes, I appreciate the write-up.
Sure. Thank you, guys.
All right, what we've all been waiting for, 6.6, principal reports.
I'm extending the offer for you to go first because you always allow me to go first as a courtesy.
I'd love to go first.
That'd be great.
I typed up some notes here so I can have talking points and not go past my 3-minute limit that I told everybody at the admin meeting was required today.
Well, I'm sure Susan will be grateful to give you some of her time.
Yes, yeah, sure. Enrollment, right now, we're at 64 and 52 in the 7th and 8th grade class, so a count of 116 students at the middle school. At the high school, 59, 54, 54, and 77, to give us 244 students at the high school. And I'll come back to that in a reason, but I always think that's a good number to shoot out to you. We received 2 new students this week and 2 new students last week at the high school and middle school, so it's and usually it's after Christmas, so I'm wondering to see what happens with, do we get some move-ins after Christmas. I'm curious to see how that goes. Another thing I thought I'd talk about is attendance, because it's one of those issues that we are definitely going to tackle, and we have been. We've been collecting monthly data on student attendance. I've been comparing monthly data from this year to last year. I'll wait till semester to share some solid data with you guys, but for some unofficial data, the high school at grades 9, 10, 11 have missed fewer periods the last 2 months compared to last year. So our attendance is better as far as missing the number of periods at the 9th and 10th grade. However, our seniors are missing more periods for one reason or another. I also want to say that the middle school's a wash. September and October as far as last year and this year, pretty even. I think we are currently in a better position staff-wise in keeping accurate data on attendance and making the necessary communications and steps with staff, students, parents, and other resources, mainly because we're fully staffed this year. But also at the same time, I want to warn you as we go through this process, because we're fully staffed, I also think that we're doing a better job with attendance, marking students absent. And one of the things that we've seen is, especially in October, school activity attendance is comparison was like 350 periods to 500 periods. And I think it's because there's a better job marking that in the system due to full staff at the high school this year.
So question on that. So you're saying we were last October, a year ago,
yeah,
we were 350, and this October 5,
something,
roughly
yeah,
in there. Do you think it's because we're doing better marking it, or our leagues have changed? And I'm not, we did gain a couple schools closer in our league, but we gained a lot of schools that are farther away too.
That might be possible, but I don't think seriously, there was like over 200 class periods missed. Mm-hmm. I don't think that would be the total. That's a good thing. I'll look into that. I'll keep an eye out for that. But I also know that that we have, because I've heard from staff members that students missing for school activities is showing up more this year. When we knew that we had kids missing last year for school activities and it wasn't showing up. And I think it's just because of a full staff in the 2 offices right now that are helping that happen.
So I'm really interested in that, I guess,
yeah,
from the athletic standpoint and our leagues.
Yeah.
The way it's,
yes,
we got a lot of travel, and then if there is something to keep in mind is if we never dig into, is there days that it's a higher number? Are we capturing bulk of it on a Friday, or is it on a Tuesday, or is it just random? On any given day of the week.
And participation per grade. Yeah, be keeping an eye on it. I like to crunch data when I have time, so it'll be fun to see what I come up with. And don't forget about that attendance piece, because I'll come back to it. Staff development, we read the Energy Bus book. It's a book I brought with me that I came across a couple years ago. It's a great read. I'm kind of biased, but it talks about culture and reflection, and we finally finished that up and are moving forward. Currently, right now, we're using Janice Heigl and Dean Richards, which is part of the House Bill 3499. They're helping us with math and language arts. So coaches, looking at the RTI process, ELL, and they're helping us with our next steps, and had a great meeting today. And we're trying to use our Avid Wicker strategies along with formative assessment, RTI and ELL best strategies to start moving forward. And that's what we're going to start attacking in January and February. Me and Mr. Townsend have a team, have something planned, and Dean Richards is doing a bunch of coaching with us next week to help us roll. So it's going to be neat to move forward on that. So that's kind of where we're headed with our early release Wednesdays and what we're doing next. Staffing, I'm about 95% done being fully staffed. We have filled the work position. Well, you will approve that today in Step Up, and we're in the process of filling my last special ed para. Hopefully that'll be done by the end of this week. I do have some concerns in staffing with retention of employees, which is nothing new here, and that'll be something that we'll work on going on through the year. And I think also we have what I would see coming from 9 years. If you ask me, the biggest difference I see from 9 years ago to this year is our growing what I call disadvantaged population. And there's a lot of students that are just disadvantaged, and disadvantaged can mean special ed, free and reduced, home life, poverty, whatever you want to call it. I just think we have a higher population. That's what I see and feel than we did 10 years ago. And that population is a fun population to work, because sometimes you see some great things happen, but they're also a population that's hard to get as much resources around to help them, because sometimes their resistance to support, or that support is not in this community because of our nature of our community isolation. So that's some concerns with staffing, is how do we address that large growing demand of our disadvantaged students. There's parent-teacher conferences. We had a solid 2 nights of conferences. Our new messaging system was ensured part reason with the large number of new staff also. We had, I would say, a good turnout. If my numbers are correct, we had 130 high school students who were represented by their parents, and 75 middle school students who actually checked in and picked up grades. I know there's a few parents, like me and my wife, who were there, but we didn't check in at the sheet. I think there was a couple maybe that had snuck in. But I still think that that's a pretty good turnout. From what I talked to staff, it's been a while, that was a good turnout for a fall parent-teacher conference. OSAA, about a month ago, me and Mr. Rose received a letter to notify us that Lakeview High School has an enrollment that is above the 2A classification. And I was like, oh, I remember these letters way back in the days when we were doing geographical isolation. But anyways, so we got that letter. I will be presenting, Mr. Rose and I, to OSAA on Monday, showing them our trend of our population and where we're at. With our current numbers of 244 students, the 2A cutoff is 205. One thing that I don't think OSAA did in the past, I'm almost positive, is they didn't have this economic, I don't have my note with me, it's economic,
They take 25%.
25% of our free and reduced kids off our count. So we are currently with our adjusted at 224, and the two level is 205. Next year we're at 195 with the current numbers. So we just got to say, hey, here we are, 195. The following 2 years we're like at 207 and 204, of course using estimates. I didn't know about the free and reduced piece. So what I'm going to do diligently as we move forward is make sure, because what happens at the high school level is a lot of parents don't fill out those forms because their kids don't eat at the school. But what I got to figure out is how can we make sure that either if they're filling it out at the elementary school that they're making all siblings, put on all siblings in there, or really trying hard to make sure that our parents know that that's happening, and they fill it out at the high school level. That would help. But if our population continues to grow, we're always going to be at that 205 level. So it's going to be probably be a yearly meeting with OSAA, trying to make sure that we get to stay in the league we don't. And I'll be curious to see how that goes. But anyways, we're going to be going on Monday. I sent a letter out, and we'll have a meeting at 9:30 on Monday with OSAA.
Well, in addition to, keep in mind, you're graduating a very large senior
Yes.
class this year too. We're
graduating a large class, but in 4 years, when we average a high 50 to low 60, all 4 grades, we're back up high again. We're 10 to 12 above. Even with the adjustment, we're 10 to 12 students above their cutoff. So I'll be curious to see how that all unfolds. On November 29th, we're going to have a 9th grade and ELL parent night. The ELL parent night will be first, and that is a 7th through 12th grade ELL parent night, where we'll bring in the ELL parents. We're sending out notifications, flyers, phone calls, bringing them in with multiple interpreters talking about stuff. And then the 9th grade parent night is similar, and we'll be talking about grades online, graduation requirements, testing supports on and off campus, and with the 9th graders, we're also throwing the daily fund, the Collins McDonald Fund also, and we'll also talk about algebra to the 9th graders, not so much the ELL. But we have some good stuff going on at the high school. That's not a report.
So in registration at the high school, the free and reduced lunch form is not mandatory. Part of registration?
It's not mandatory at any level.
The problem is I think it was better this year because they, you guys, did the online registration. And so I think that we captured a lot more than what we normally do. But what a lot of the problem is the parents, the hard copy forms, they tend to ignore it and move on. Well, then they start getting these big, humongous bills that they may or may not be able to afford. And so we've tried to work with them, but some of them just flat out won't fill them out, and we're stuck with high balances. However, I think over the last probably 2 years, the secretaries have been really hammering on making sure that those kiddos are filling something out, so that we can get them qualified. That way they don't have a huge bill.
So is there a workload if it just was flat out, you're not registered until all these forms are filled out?
But that's not a mandatory form. You don't have to fill it out to register.
But you can't, you can make, the deal that you could do, Dustin, is that you could make in the registration, since it's online, if you can't,
you just can't keep going.
Right, exactly. It makes you fill out that form. We can pull that trigger.
I just wasn't sure if that creates a workload though. Does somebody have to go through it? Does it create a workload for somebody else?
The beauty of the whole thing in this past year, which, yes, if you were talking to me last year, it was every single one of those were hand put in. This year, it fed into our program, what we call the nutrition program. So it feeds in, and it's a click of a button, and they'll process them all. And so that part's been nice, except for the part where, they might put, the kids have got aliases, or they have 5 different last names, but they only put one of those last names, so nothing matches up. Well, you don't catch those until somebody says something, obviously, but that's been the nice part, is it's all electronic, so it was a lot smoother for me up here this year.
If a parent qualifies for free and reduced lunches but chooses not to fill out the form, we can't keep them from registering.
You can't keep them from registering, but I think you could probably make it where you couldn't go past the form unless you filled it out with register. And Lonnie, you can speak to that probably more so than anybody.
And I've been on the phone with our LBL system, and they can make it like that for us. And so we've talked about that. Janet and I and the admin team have really talked about, let's just make it pop up, they fill it out, and then move on, like you're saying, and then they move on. If they refuse to, then we have another problem. They'd stop registration right there, and we'd have to do registration a different way. And then we haven't looked at, can we mandate that form? Can we?
You cannot legally, because it's
you can't mandate that.
You can't mandate it, and I don't think you can actually stop it in the process either. You have to provide an opt-out if they don't want to fill it out, because again, it turns into that you're forcing a family to use something that they're not going to use. So I would recommend you can make it so that you'd make some steps to skip, but you can't have it be totally unskippable, because otherwise you could trigger some issues you don't want to trigger.
We just keep getting those messages. Are you sure you want to skip this? Yes. Are you sure you want to skip this?
Oh, for crying out
You
loud.
have to do that like 15 times, and then they let you.
You only do it once, because otherwise you functionally make it unskippable. So just be very careful in that area.
I think what we'll do is we'll try really hard to make sure that the secretaries talk with each other, and if we know that we have a family that's registered at the elementary level because kids don't care, it's a status. It's a status at the high school level, and or it's not a need because students don't all eat at the school. So we have those two issues, that there's no need to do it, so they don't fill it out, or it's a status symbol, or it's a matter of pride. I don't want to fill that out. But I think we'll do a better job communicating between the 3 buildings, and also at the same time talking to our parents as politely as we can, saying how if they do fill it out, whether they use the service or not, they're helping us in the long run with our ADN count as far as classification goes.
We've also asked the secretaries to connect those kids now, till the end of this school year, so it'll be cleaned up for next year on registration, so that when there are 4 or 5 different last names, we can connect that now, and we can call, and so we're kind of cleaning up our table, our whole student table with their parent contacts as well. So
I'm hoping that'll help too.
I honestly think that the registration with the free and reduced lunches, I believe, in my opinion, has increased as far as that application. So that's helped us out a lot up here, for whatever that's worth.
If you want a copy of that letter I sent to OSAA, I think Mr. Cahill has a copy of it, and it has a projected enrollment along with the estimated reduced lunch number cut off.
I just think it's interesting, the large reclassification project that they went through just 12 months ago, and now we're getting letters.
Well, they do it yearly no matter what. Because I remember in the past, Mr. Nash, Bob Nash and I had to write letters almost every year. And at that time, it was there was an asterisk next to Lakeview that said geographical isolation. So.
Well, Mr. Stratton, thank you for the report. Is there anything else? You still have a couple minutes left.
I'm good.
Susan has none, I think.
She'll never let me go first again.
Wait, I want to make sure you.
I'm done, Susan.
Our elementary conferences were about average for our attendance, about 94% attendance for teacher, parent-teacher conferences, but they seem to stretch out a little longer before and after, getting parents there. And then right after that, we brought dental services into the school during the school day. We served about 35% of our population. They provided dental services, Advantage Dental did, for about 150 kids. They did not get everybody done. They got 110 done in those 2 days, and they've scheduled another day to come back and pick up those other kids. They also went out to Union and did about 25 kids out there. We did picture retakes. Kindergarten, 3rd grade went to the pumpkin patch. I got a pumpkin out of the deal. One of the biggest activities that we have entertained this last month was our playground dedication. The ADA playground project is completed for the most part, with the exception of a sign that we're going to put up thanking our donors. And we gathered donors, community partners, and dedicated the playground as the Jerry Owen Memorial Playground. And Miss Owen was there and said a few words. Mr. Cahill was there, and it was just it was a fun event. It's good. Our Christmas program's coming up. Union's is December 13th at 6. And then Hayes is at 9:30 on the 21st of December, and Fremont's is at 12:30. We are serving about 30% of our population in an after-school program, and that just continues to get better and better with more teachers taking an interest in wanting to step up. But we're fortunate, and aside from the high school kids, we have that block from 2:30 to 3 that those kids are on buses lots of times, or latchkey kiddos, and so we can keep them until 3 and give them a little extra remedial help. So for professional development, Janice Heigl, our math consultant, is working on math centers that the kids are at, so teachers can pull a remedial group of kids, and we've purchased some supplemental curriculum to target some of those remedial needs in math. And then Dean Richards that comes is working this month with our parents, or our teachers, to talk to our students and each other about assessments. And then what will happen, we did this with math last year, is that our teachers are all going to be required to give a common assessment and then score it, and then they debrief with Dean and talk about the differences in scoring and how they're scoring them to make our curriculum delivery and our assessments more consistent. And it was pretty powerful when we did it for math last year, so we're going to do that. This month, I'm headed to the law conference next week with these gentlemen, but I'm going to go a day early and tour some schools, and I thought you might be interested. We're seeing a little bit of a need for some alternative placements within our school for some of our special ed kids that have severe behavior issues. And then I also want to visit with some other principals and kind of look at some programs, because our PE mandate for our extended minutes goes into effect this next fall. And we need to be able to figure out how we're going to facilitate that and inclement weather and lack of gym space and those kinds of things. So that's why I'm going a little bit early. And then Mr. Cahill has tasked us with attendance and working on attendance. So at the elementary level, we monitor the attendance on a monthly basis as well and send out attendance letters the first of every month. What we're seeing this year that's a little bit different is a huge increase in kiddos that are just being pulled out for vacations, appointments, those kinds of things. We've really hammered that group of kids that are at risk that maybe don't have someone to get them to school in the morning, and they're doing quite a bit better with the data that we're seeing. But it's a large population of kids that are traveling and going out. We had kids that didn't start school for 2 weeks at the beginning of the year because they were on vacation, those kinds of things that really bring our attendance right down. So, and then Union did not host their normal Thanksgiving dinner. It was getting so large. They were feeding about 150 people at a little tiny kitchen. They went to a Thanksgiving dessert potluck and program, and that was really well attended as well. Do you have any questions?
Thank you both for the reports. And one thing that wasn't brought up in Mr. Stratton's report, I'd just like to acknowledge the success that our school had in fall sports this year.
Thanks. Well done.
Okay. Well, some of us have been really waiting for this report as well.
You should be super excited, Dustin.
6.7 financial report, and then allotted 45 minutes.
Well, I'll try.
Got the dash in between the
If you can't win it tonight, we can hear, come back tomorrow or Friday to
Right,
hear.
so I won't be here tomorrow. I'm already checked.
See how hard it's snowing?
Don't care. You guys have not rode with my husband. We will get there. Well, I'm kind of excited. This is kind of a work in progress, but it's a pretty good start, and it's a good top-level board overview look of our financials right at the moment. So this is as of 10/31 that I'm reconciled through, obviously, since this is still November. So I'm pretty excited. This is the Forecast 5, and this is merely a piece of what this software can actually do for us. So with that, I wanted to start off with the top 10 sources of our revenue, which this $2,161,000 is basically our state school fund, common school fund, and a majority of that. Ad valorem taxes levied by the district. This is what we've collected thus far, $189,000 up to 10/31. And of course, you guys know that when I go to do November, it'll be more like $1.5 million. It'll be big. Luckily, Lake County is a high percentage of tax collections, so November looks huge when we get to that. The next one down is this regular day school tuition, which this is a accounts receivable from 2017-18 from MODOC. So that was a leftover. The interest on our investments was in our LGIP pool. This is cumulative, also from July to October 31st. So interest rate is doing well there, which we keep most of our money there, as most of you guys, I've said that before. Moving down, the $11,625 was also an accounts receivable that was from 17-18, and that is from the Title 1A program, which is federal funds. Penalties on interest, that's our tax penalties interest, $7,600 is coming from the county. The $7138, that is also an accounts receivable, and I just wanted to bring this up because it was the outdoor school program that Mrs. Warner had down in her level last year, which she has that grant again this year. And so I believe it's roughly the same amount. They disallowed some of our costs. However, we did get a pretty good substantial majority of that there. Moving down, miscellaneous is pretty small, and then our recovery from our prior year's expenditures, that $525 is actually from our SAFE true-up. So we actually overpaid our SAFE workers' comp, so that was great. I did want to mention that the $375 club fundraising was actually a donation from the Seroptimus Club. They had donated to the emergency service project that Bobby had going on, which was partially to stock for tourniquets and things like that. So we did purchase those on the expenditure side, and wanted to make note that the Seroptimus had done that. I don't think that we had previously mentioned that before, and I believe that Bobby also did a nice thank you letter to them, thanking them for those dollars. So that's just the top 10. Like I said, this is kind of a work in progress. According to this graph, we collected roughly maybe 2.2 million, which is just above our average, or what our projected was of this blue here. But this projected is kind of skewed right at the moment, and the reason that is I only have 17, 18 in for prior years. I do not have 15, 16, 16, 17 in, and that's a work in progress. So this, I suspect, will re-divvy out our projected for the years, taking in averages. And this, of course, the lighter shade of blue is our complete budget for the year. So if I move back up here to the top, again, I just want to mention that the projected year-end balance as a percentage of this budgeted revenues, I don't want to bring this piece up. And the reason why I don't is because Oregon is funky in that how we report our beginning and ending fund balance. And so Forecast 5 is working on a fix for us because other states don't report it like we do. So they don't include it in their stuff. So this too is also a bit skewed, and so I'm just saying ignore this for the moment. This is our actual total year-to-date revenues. We've collected about 27.39, and it was projected to be at 25%. And again, that's just based off of 17, 18 at this point. The local sources, again, is the taxes. We collected about 7.84%, and last year was about 5.3. And then final, whoops. The state sources, which is obviously our state school fund again, and common school fund. And that we collected up to 42%, 42.54%, and we were projected to collect 40%. So we're kind of ahead of the game on the revenue. Any questions on that?
If it were me, I wouldn't approve vacation until 15, 16. 16, 17 was in the program, but...
You know what, Dustin? I didn't see you down here every weekend. And I did get my audit done, so that's got to count for something. Okay, are we done jabbing at me?
Probably not.
Okay. Well, I'm moving on to expenditures. So this breaks it down. This is something that I really like. This is our license salary. Down below is our classified. Now keep in mind that these are our top 10 expenditures by our object, and those objects are the salaries broken out, administrators, classified, licensed. And this is from 7/1 to 10/31. And so this, for me, this is really something that's spectacular for me to look at because it really breaks it out for us. There's our PERS costs, this 102 to 100,000. So, you know, that it's just worth its weight in gold to me, I guess. When you come down to budgeting, you can really look and see and compare further down the road. The TSAs are at 110,000 thus far. My consumable supplies, of course, is 98,000. Keep in mind, July, August, September, we do a lot of purchasing. October even, we get those bills from those purchases from the month before. Social Security is paid in, obviously. And right at the moment, we're going to see this property insurance premiums stick in here probably till the first of the year, just because they're so high, 66,000. I would expect, you know, more of our consumables, travel probably is going to hit this top 10, I would say, in here. So, there we go. So just another bar graph. We've spent less than what we projected on the dark blue, and of course this is our budget for the year, and close to. going back up to the top. Again, ignore the green, as that, I think that's skewed. So actual year-to-date expenditures on the whole, 21%, and we projected to spend 25% at the end of October. And of course, we've broke it out by salaries and benefits, which is always a big one for us. Right on track, about 22%, projected to be 22%. All other objects, so that's meaning, consumables, all the other pieces that are not payroll-related items, 27%, which is less, and projected to be at 33%. I looked through the ending fund balance as of 10/31 on this on these graphics, and again, it's skewed. So I'm just going to give you the bare bones minimum on that verbally, because one, Oregon reports differently than other states, and they're set up for other states. So they are working on that fix. So we're hoping to have that fix coming directly to us. So, so far to date, from July to October, $2,432,720 was collected as total revenue. Our total expenses, $2,110,959. Our beginning fund balances, and this is an audited beginning fund balance because I finished my audit before I'm leaving on vacation, was $1,393,328. And so at the end of October, we were sitting with our general fund at $1,715,089. So we're sitting in pretty good shape. And like I said, I'm pretty excited because this thing is going to be useful in the future.
Can you scroll down just a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And over. So one thing that I see there, it looks like our contributions for tier 3 and then tier 1 and 2 are almost the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that the contribution rate's pretty much the same for each of those. There might be a little difference.
There is a little bit of a difference. I believe it's like 22 versus 27%.
Okay. So I guess the comment I have is that it appears that about half of our staff is probably going to be at the retirement age within the next 10 to 15.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a great value,
Yep,
And so
they're really close.
we look at 50% of our staff retiring in 10 to 15 years, plus the normal attrition. We are gearing up for a lot of turnover.
Yep.
Yeah.
We are.
And what's going on with PERS, and I've seen it with a lot of different situations, is people are pulling it as fast as they can a lot of times because there's some stuff going forward. They can't retroactively change benefits, but there's some earning calculations that can change going forward, and they seem to mess with it a little bit every year. So a lot of your tier 2 folks, even which are the most recent batch, are even pulling it early too. So that's going to accelerate. You're not going to see people stick it out as long or as often because it's not to their advantage to do that.
Well, what I read in the governor's recommended budget and other articles is we probably won't see a big spike of retirees this year because of PERS reform. The other thing I read that was interesting is that in the recommended budget, she is trying to get, we're proposing to get back to the 49-51 split for revenue.
That'll actually be nice, if you ask my opinion.
Any other questions for Janet? Feel free to call her tomorrow if you do.
You can feel free to call, but screening is really a good option for me.
Okay, thank you, Janet.
She's been like this all week.
Oh, good. All week. Capital, I can't say it, capital improvement projects.
Well, facilities, capital improvements. I was trying to change it up.
She's confusing me.
Real smart this week. That was so last week.
I know.
Started that.
Got my Louise back here.
Possibly. Okay, so as you guys heard, the ADA playground is fully functional, done, except for her little sign. Well, it's not even little, it's huge. And And so she's been working on that, trying to get that taken care of. And I just want to say that, you know, my maintenance guys did a heck of a job down there doing that. And also so did the county, tearing that out and really helping us out, leveling that out. And then of course Rocky Mountain came in and they actually came back and fixed a piece of it twice. And so it wasn't the first time. We called them on it. The second time they said, nope, we need to do it again. So I was very impressed with their professionalism and no change orders, and so that was awesome. Except for the one, which we did have that. So, but that was minor compared to ones I've seen in the past. So I've kind of moved on to bigger and better things, I guess, if you will. I don't know if they're bigger and better, but they are consuming my life. I'm going to start off kind of small. At the DMS, of course, we approved Rob Thornton's outfit to come in and do the bathrooms there. And so I did a tour yesterday of all of these things just to make sure that I didn't miss anything that was crucial. And so Casey has been working diligently with a broken arm in there. I give it to him. They have framed in the walls. All the walls are framed in and ready to go. Right now, Schaefer Electric was there starting yesterday. We're there today, laying out their electrical and running all new wires through there. The plumbing, Ken has been in and out several times, working on the heaters. We've had to, actually the one heater is a little bit longer than what we had anticipated. So we actually took it off and put it on the other side, on the other set of bathrooms, and put the smaller side into that heater, or that smaller heater in there. So that helped out a bit. And then the only other change that we've had to make is we eliminated a sink that was running up against that heater, and so it wasn't providing enough room in there. And then we flip-flopped the boys and the girls bathroom. So we ended up putting the boys on the left and the girls on the right, just for space, urinal space and then regular bathroom space. So that kind of switched things around, which wasn't a bad thing. It worked out well, and they're going forward with that. So once the electrical and the plumbing are done, then we can complete the drywall, get the fixtures in, and the finishes should be able to be completed. Basically, we're on target to finish as of January 1 of 2019, so pretty excited about that. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be on target as of right now. Knock on wood, nothing's wrong has happened. So that's the bathrooms. A little bit of noise. Thorntons have been great about trying to be there super early. In fact, one morning they set off the alarms and Bill called me and what do I do? Pretty sure you should go check on it. 45 minutes away, I can't do anything for you. But they've been pretty mindful of KCC. They've been mindful of the Step Up program as far as noise, and of course they've made a little bit of noise, you know. But they've tried to be ahead of the ball game before they got in there. So they've been super great to work with on the bathrooms piece. So our big project and a lot of contention out there, I'm hearing, and I thought, well, we're going to have to put that to rest. So CTE shop. So here's the deal with the CTE shop. We do have all the welders. We do have all the small engines for each of those capacity. So Friday we were supposed to have a truck get delivered here. It never showed up till Monday, which actually worked out because nobody was here. Found the truck, and what they delivered were booths that consisted of the SMAWs, which is the MIG and the stick-weld booths. We are missing, right at the moment, the booths for the shielded metal gas booths. We called on those to see what the status was on those. They're scheduled to be finished building by 12/10, and then as soon as they meet the inspection, they'll ship. So I would anticipate we would probably have them by the week of the 17th, probably towards the end of that. That would be my anticipation as long as they pass their inspections there. So that would mean we would have all the booths here. Then, as far as the booths that we do have, got those moved into the shop. They are sitting in the shop. The shop is really tore apart at this point. Carl was supposed to come in, Carl Tracy was supposed to come in today and set up one of those booths and start hooking it up and make sure he had every single part necessary to hook it up to the lines, the electrical lines in there. So he was supposed to have that done, start that today, possibly have that done today. And then as soon as he knows he's got all the materials that he needs for that one booth and just exactly how much he needs, he'll install the rest of those booths. The other piece of that is, and I guess that will be dependent, he may not have got in there today because Christy Reese's classes, pressure washed the walls, all the black off the walls, and painted it. They were still painting yesterday, bits and pieces. They got they got most of it done, but I think there was still some on that wall that the SMAW welder booths were going to go on. And so, so as long as they got that finished, then Carl could start in on that, obviously. So it's kind of supposed to be a gray color. You turn the lights on, it's a little bit more blue. But it's all good, it's all good. They're happy, I'm happy, it's great. So they were about done, and then they were going to move on the other side of the wall where the other booths that are still being built, so that side would be also done. So then on the, so the SMAW booths were basically plumbed for Carl Tracy, that's his side. Norco actually needs to come in and do the plumbing for the shielded metal gas booths for those. And they will be here as soon as they ship and get here. So we are anticipating that Christmas break, they'll do that while the kids are gone. That's the anticipation as long as we get those booths here, essentially. Pacific Power is completed, coming into the from the street to the building. They've done their pole and done their huge boxes out there. So Pacific Power is out of the woodwork. And Carl Tracy has done his pieces in bits and pieces, or in phases, I should say, is better put. And so he was as far as he could be until those booths arrive on Monday. So he's been great to work with as well. So in the past month, I've actually had to hustle for business. And so we ran ads in Klamath Falls and in Lakeview for a couple of weeks. Had no responses for a contractor, which is very disappointing. I think there's several reasons, but I think that the main thing that is stemming behind that is that you have an economy that is way better than it was a year ago, or even 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, those guys were scrambling looking for jobs. Now, they're turning people away. I hustled, I don't know, 2 or 3 of them. I finally found somebody that said, I will come look at it. And so the tentatively, right at the moment, we're set for next week. Mr. Claus is supposed to come, Jim Claus is supposed to come and take a look at it. He'll be back from Nevada, working on a big project that he got hung up on this last week. He was supposed to be done last week. He's still there this week, but he anticipates to be there this next week. I have him set up to meet with Rob, which is our project manager on this, and Rob has done a phenomenal job coordinating, ordering, getting the right pieces, parts, etc. And so he's going to work with Jim, hopefully to get the contract pieces done, which won't take very long, as long as we get a live body crew in there. So that's the plan. So that was a little bit of a relief to have somebody respond that said, yep, we can come take a look. So that's been the biggest frustration, I think, and I think that's a misconception in the community that nothing's being done, but it's a matter of no contractors and hustling to get them. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware. But I've had to beg, steal, and borrow, and plead, and beg, and whatever else to get somebody in here to get this job done.
I think also that once we pull all the stuff out, we thought it'd be crazy not to clean the walls and clean up the shop, and that's taken some out of time. which has, I think the only person that's held up is maybe Mr. Tracy and his crew, because we had to wait for the booths to get there before they could move further, so. Excited, saw the booths come, excited, because once those are there, things are gonna start clicking, so.
Yeah. So basically, Rob and I's goal, as managing the whole project, is we're hoping that we can get for the majority of it during Christmas break, which is a short window this year, being that Christmas break is pretty short, really, in there. But a lot of things can happen when there's no live bodies in there too. We don't have to work around a classroom or this, that, or the other. So that'll be nice. The first of the year, I would anticipate the booths that we do have here would be in and functional on that wall, and those guys could be able to go ahead and start welding on those, the MIG and stick welders. The other pieces, you know, that's going to be dependent on if they hold true to being finished built on 1210, shipping, and getting here in an appropriate manner, and then of course Norco coming in right behind them.
Are air handlers on site too?
We think we have everything else, as far as we know.
So those were those 4 things that came with the booths? Because those looked weird. They didn't look like the booths. Okay.
Yeah, those flat.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So yeah, so it's very exciting, but it does raise a lot of misconception in the community, which goes without saying, I think, sometimes. But so we've been trying to set the record straight with that. It is making progress. It just takes, construction always takes time, and it always is frustrating because you can't, should be there yesterday and they're not. It's 2 weeks from now, or whatever the case may be. So, or you're waiting on those booths to get here. So, any other questions on that CTE shop? The goal is to be completely in place by semester, which is towards the end of January. Excuse me, was it 25th-ish? Okay, 24th. So that we can start a new semester fresh and offer those classes that we intended to offer in the first place.
And I also think Janet's operating under a little bit of a microscope because of that mess over at KU where they went $6 million over their bond budget. It hasn't helped when they've got the school just close to us with, in the newspaper about every other week, looking like crap and having lynch mob meetings. Janet is not doing that. They're making great progress. There's not a trillion change orders. We're on budget. But like I said, I think you've got some hypersensitivity going on right now because you've got such a catastrophe going on with Climate Union and some of that, and a lot of people are a little bit tense about that, to say the least.
Jen and Rob really, pushing this thing along. Like I said, I think there's no perfect world when it comes to construction or timelines or anything like that. My hat's off to both of them for the great work they've done. I think the other thing, that was really kind of cool was, ODE sends a team down about every 3 to 4 months to take a look at our progress, and they sent a team down, at the end of October. It was pretty cool. We had the new power pole was in the grant budget, and there was PP&L put into that big power pole that day, so they were very dazzled with that. They thought that was pretty neat. So anyways.
That was not even set up either.
Nobody was out there with their cameras.
So I don't think there's any questions on that. I did have a question.
Right?
On facilities anyway. We've had our first significant rains, wet snow. Any issues?
Oh, of course. The roof's leaking. We got it wrapped up. It's going to be a game. Always is every year. So.
And I guess where are our issues?
Well, the gym is always an issue for us, for sure. But we did get up there and wrap that up and do what we normally do with wrapping it up tight and that sort of thing. So we had that first rain last week, I think it was, and so they hustled and got up there and got it wrapped up. So that doesn't mean that it won't leak through there, and we patch it up some more. So
We had that rain on Friday after Thanksgiving, and I'm just going to run down there and take a look. And I did, dry as a bone. I was very happy to see that.
Yeah.
Ms. Moses has a really great maintenance crew working under her, though, that come around every single time that it rains, check in with building administrators and say, where are your troubled areas, what do we need to do? And I very much appreciate that they check in with us. so that we can just keep school rolling along, and they were kind of working behind the scenes.
Well, I know we have those issues, and it's been identified in the big
Your plan.
Yeah, that thing.
But I think it's something we just need to keep voicing out there. Roof's leaking again.
Yep, oh yeah.
And when you
Spongy, I
guys,
use the word spongy a lot when I talk about roofs.
and again, when you guys do look at going for something, if you do decide to go for a bond or something to deal with those facilities issues, make sure you wrap it all together, have all of that stuff in there, and that you truly get the expense, because you don't want to be that board that is explaining to a very angry community how they did this big bond measure and suddenly you're $6 million over budget. And Climate Schools got away with it because they had $2 million of property they could sell to make up some of the difference and some loans, so you don't want to be there.
I'll be off the board by then. We'll leave it for the new guy.
So anyway, I do have just a brief more. Sorry. So a couple of things along those lines, that big, thick report. I have not forgotten that. That is my next project. When I get back from vacationing in the hot sun.
Stop.
They have sent me some stuff, and so I haven't been able to sit down and really absorb it and have that conversation with them. So that they're next on my list. Because of the time frame, we will have that has to be my next project. But I briefly wanted to touch base. We still do have a project out at the ag farm that is hanging out there and it's hung out there too far for me. But right at the moment, we're going to have to deal with it a little bit through the winter, and that's okay. But on the pivot, we did that pivot in about June or so. Got that put up. So that physical pivot is there. Now keep in mind that we've got a pipe main line across the creek from the pump and the well back across over that creek to get water to the pivot. And that has not been done. Christy had the best of intentions of having a class do it and doing a lesson on it, and it just never worked out for her, and she's very busy. So what I've done is I basically called her up and said, let me help you. So I sent Joe out there to kind of clean that piece up for her, which she's completely grateful for. Every time I see her, she's like, thank you for taking that off my plate. But right at the moment, where we are is Surprise Valley Electric. We contacted them for some power poles to run electrical across the creek from there to get to the pivot. They did it on their own time. They donated the poles and they donated the labor. So kudos to them one more time. They've bailed us out. High Desert Electric, he had to order wire to run across the overhead. And so the plan is right now, we're too soft. Obviously we've had quite enough rain that it's too soft. So we're looking at Tuesday. It's supposed to be about 5 degrees. He'll be out there at daylight. If he can make it freeze, if we've got a good freeze, he'll slip out there, get it across there, and be done with that piece of it. If that happens, and we, weather permitting, we get the freeze that we need to get across there, he'll get that done. We will call SureTap, which is the guy that put in the pivot for us up at Bronze. He will return back down here, fire the pivot up, so he can also put the backstops in and get it for it to stop. He'll put those in. He then also, him and I made a deal that he would be back the first part of spring and make sure that water runs through it. We have no leaks, we have no holes in it, we have nothing going on because I don't feel like putting water through it right now. I don't think that's a good investment for us right at the moment. So he promises to come back, and I don't doubt that he won't. And then of course that main line is going to have to go across there in the spring and get it across there. Currently though, right at the moment, Chuck Messner is working up the field and will plant triticale out there. So that should come up pretty easily, I would think. Hopefully. You usually can't kill it, so it should be okay. So, just to let you guys know that is still hanging out there. However, we're making strides to get that finished up and wrapped up, but it's going to run over into the spring. at this point. Now I'm done.
Are you sure?
Well, no.
Alright, thank you, Jenna. Alright, we're gonna just cruise right through the rest of this here. Number 7, old business.
We have none.
Number 8, new business.
We have none on that either.
Number 9, consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion has passed. 10, announcements.
I'm going on vacation. Oh, not that kind of a vacation?
Rub it in.
Hawaii.
11, next board meeting agenda item.
Well, I got a few things, first there's only, keep in mind, there's only one meeting in December, so we'll have I think it's gonna be a very short meeting. I don't see any real business items coming up. Certain persons in Hawaii, because I don't think they'll bring anything
That'll be
forward.
my first day back,
First
so.
day back, so. Anyway, we'll probably do reports. Keep in mind, that night is the LHS DMS concert at 6:30, so I'd like to have this thing, wrapped up in a reasonable amount of time so we can go support that concert that night, so. But, yeah, principals report, AD's report, ASB, perhaps a report on school funding, where the politics are on that. And I'm going to give you a quick update on Senate Bill 1067, what I've been doing with that. And that's kind of the long and short of it. Anything on your end?
I'm going to present him with a little OSBA survey and an election that we have to do every year.
That's right.
So,
Do you want to push the law conference out then until January and report back out in January?
I think we'll move that to January.
We typically do anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to put that on January, Jim, because like I said, I want to support the LHS concert.
Sure.
So.
Anything else? Number 12.
I'm gonna adjourn the meeting.
Moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.